Greetings, Exiles. The new league is about to begin, which means it's time to choose a league starter. The patch notes for the 3.29 include many changes and meaningful buffs for self-casters. Nice try, GGG, but this will be an attack-based league starter as usual. Shield Crush Berserker. This was my league starter in the last league, and to be honest, it was a really good build, so I decided to update it for the Curse of the Allflame, considering that I learned a lot about this build in the last league and how to optimize it. Let's get started. I'd like to start this video with a quick demonstration, because I think Shield Crush is a slightly underrated skill, and many players consider it slow, clunky, not fun, and boring. That's why I want to show that even with modest gear, which you can buy on day 2, this build can be fast, fun, and pack solid damage. And in the endgame, it's one of the most fun builds I've played in the last few years. Perfect for zooming and fast mapping. Again, I'm not making bold claims that this is the best league starter or an S+ tier build. I just want to show that it's not as bad a build as everyone says it is, and that it can also be fast and fun if you use the right items. This build also has very good progression, and at every stage, from the campaign all the way to the endgame, it feels great, which is another reason why it's a solid league starter. You don't need expensive or rarely found items for this build to start working, and Shield Crush feels solid right from Act 1. Our main skill is available starting at level 1, so we can start using it right away. Although I recommend waiting until level 8, when we can use this shield, because the damage scales off the shield, specifically, from the armor or evasion on our shield. That's why we have good damage even in the early acts, and you won't have any trouble progressing through the campaign. And considering that we're a Berserker, we won't have any damage issues anyway. That's why I like this particular Ascendancy for Shield Crush. It delivers a lot of damage right away. And that's exactly what you need at the start of the league because we're less dependent on our gear. On top of that, we get a lot of attack speed, which is another important stat for us. The higher our attack speed, the better Shield Crush feels. I'm not going to do a detailed comparison of Berserker with other Ascendancies that use Shield Crush. First of all, this is just a game, not rocket science or developing a cure for cancer, where every choice matters. Second, I've already made my choice, and that's Berserker. Because it's damage. Damage. More damage. What else do you need at the start of the league? Enough yapping, let's move on to your favorite part, the POB, and take a look at gear, DPS, and other stats. I want to mention right away that I've prepared POBs for different milestones, so you'll have a clear path to follow right from the start. In addition, there are 2 separate POBs, one for endgame and one for a budget explosion build. Let's start with the first milestone. Tier 5 unique item, rare gear with life and resistances. And a very basic shield that you can craft using a few essences and benchcraft, so you can consider it a free shield. And here's our damage with this gear. Pretty good. And here's our defense. Overall, not bad either. It's not the ultimate defense, but it's quite good for basic equipment. The Chaos Max hit is very poor, but that's a common problem at the start of a league, and I didn't want to add chaos resistance to every piece of gear to fix it. That would be a bit unfair because such gear would be very expensive in the first few days of a new league. But the most interesting part begins when we add these 2 unique items to the build. Damage increases significantly. And I like these numbers much better. To be honest, these items will be out of reach for most players on day 1, since they're pretty expensive at the start. But by day 2 or 3, their prices drop significantly, and many players will be able to afford them without any trouble. As far as I can remember, in the last league, Emperor's Vigilance cost 2 Divine Orbs on day 1 and 30 Chaos Orbs on day 3. But those are just numbers to give you an idea of the budget we're talking about. But you have to admit that's solid damage for day 2 or 3 with minimal investment. And here's the damage with Foulborn Emperor's Vigilance and some solid gear. My endgame build with some GG gear. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this build has excellent scaling, and you won't have any problems even with minimal gear. Also, we have some great upgrades that are inexpensive but still provide a lot of damage. I'd also like to point out shield charge specifically. If you watched my gameplay closely, you might have noticed that I use this skill very often, and it deals quite a bit of damage. That's because it scales just like our main skill, plus I added 3 support gems for more damage. And as you can see for yourselves, this significantly increases our clearing speed, since we can kill trash mobs very easily and quickly without using our main skill. Some might even think this is a shield charge build, but think whatever you want. It just so happens that our movement skill deals substantial damage and triggers explosions, and it would be foolish not to use it for more optimal gameplay and zooming, because speed is a king. As for the new league, let's talk a bit about what this build has gained or lost. Actually, there isn't much to it. On the downside, getting 3 green sockets at the start of the league for this unique sword doesn't seem realistic. So we've lost a bit of attack speed. It's not too critical, but it's still a little annoying. On the other hand, red sockets now grant 35% increased global physical damage, which is very good and a potential buff for the mid-game. On the bright side, thanks to the socket changes, we've gained an additional 10% quality, which translates to 5% more damage against single targets. Overall, nothing critical for us. Next, I'd like to talk about the weak points of this build, because without this part, this video would be misleading. First and foremost, it's defense, and that's not this build's strongest suit. The main problem is that we have a lot of block chance, but because we're using Emperor's Vigilance, we have glancing blows. And our block becomes very weak. However, we do have 5000 HP, Fortify, Endurance charges, armor, max resistances, so this is definitely not a squishy build, but I'd still like a little more defense in the mid-game. That's because in the endgame build, I have expensive items that partially solve this problem. On the other hand, you can always reduce damage from 9 million to 7 million and gain more survivability if that's what you need. So there are options here, but you'll have to make a compromise. For example, you can use this Ascendancy node because it works well with glancing blows, since we always take damage. Of course, we'll lose some damage, as I mentioned earlier, but our survivability in maps increases significantly. And when I tested this setup, I was surprised because you won't see the effect in POB, but you'll feel it right away in maps. Also, this isn't a well-rounded beast. You'll certainly be able to kill uber bosses, but this build was designed more for mapping, where we need speed and where we'll be killing a lot of monsters per second. So if you're looking for a well-rounded beast, this build isn't for you. And finally, endgame potential. If you're one of those players who loves maxing out investments and dealing damage measured in hundreds of millions, this build isn't for you either, and you should take a closer look at the Slayer, Headhunter, Sublime Vision, and Progenesis. This is our endgame. It's difficult for us to scale our damage any further, and essentially, once you've purchased these items, the build is finished. Of course, you can continue to invest in gear, but you won't see any insane numbers. I guess those are the main downsides you need to know about, and I think it's time to say goodbye because that's all I wanted to tell you. I hope this video and my POB help you decide whether or not to go for this bait. Anyway, as always, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. I'd also appreciate your likes and subscriptions. Bye for now, good luck in the new league, and see you in the next video.